Today's podcast, we're going to talk about the American economy and where we see it as of now, August 2025. My podcast is designed to help new and seasoned investors and entrepreneurs break free from the financial confusion by sharing real world investing and business strategies they can use for building lasting wealth and freedom. All right. Well, we're going to be talking about the economy right now in August of 2025. And I'm just going to dive in. I apologize in advance. I'm going to be all over the map from a lot of different sources, a lot of different articles, and a lot of different data points that I look at periodically throughout each year when I'm wondering, where are we right now in the economy? What do I think is going to happen next? Because as investors, we have to be thinking about, what do we think is happening next? What do we see on the horizon? Not that any of us have a crystal ball, of course, but I think if you look at enough data points and you look at enough culture and what's going on with the American consumer, you can extrapolate pretty easily where the trend is heading. Are we headed this direction or are we headed this direction? And I think as investors, that's important because we can get out ahead of that and try to position ourselves where the economy is headed. It's just like the hockey great Wayne Gretzky used to say when asked how he was so successful. He said, I learned early on to just skate where the puck was going. I wanted to be where it was going, not where it is now. And I think economically, as investors, we can do much the same thing, albeit maybe not with the precision that he did in hockey. So when I look at the economy and trying to determine where we are at this point, and I'm asking myself one thing: am I bullish or bearish? And if I'm bullish or bearish, where am I bullish or bearish? Do I see a particular segment of the economy that is going to do real well, in my opinion, or do real poorly, in my opinion, going forward? And a lot of times you can see some bullish signs and bearish signs at the same time. And I promise you, we do today. So as I go through this, you're going to be brain numb at some point thinking, now, wait a minute, is this good or bad, Tom? Are you saying things are good or are you saying things are bad? And I'll tell you up front, I'm not saying either one. I am just reporting the data. That's it. And I will leave it to you to decide what to do with that data and what you think you should do with your investing going forward. But given enough data, I think we can certainly discern some trends going forward. So with that setup, we're going to talk about three things, basically. When I'm looking at this, I want to know three things. How are they feeling? How are they doing? And what's on the horizon? Those are my first three questions in that order. Now, when I say they, it bears some explanation, right? How are they doing? And how are they how are they feeling first? Then how are they doing? What I'm talking about is the American consumer. I'm talking about this massive, massive cohort of people in America that consume things, because the personal consumption in this country makes up 2/3 of our economy. So if the American consumer is feeling good and they're doing good, it's almost guaranteed, short of a black swan event or something of that nature, that we're going to have a pretty good track going forward economically. Now, if they're feeling horrible and doing horrible, obviously the opposite would be true. And if one is one way, one is the other, that's where it gets difficult. And that's where we have to dig into the next one, which is, how are they doing? And that's where we get into the data and we start looking at statistics and say, well, they may be feeling this way, but their debt load looks like this. The foreclosure rate looks like this. Auto delinquencies look like this. And that may tell a different story yet. So we're going to talk about all of that data. And then lastly, we'll talk about what's on the horizon. What do we see that we know is happening that is going to shift this one way or the other? So that is my simplistic way of looking at the data that is available and determining where I think the economy is going from here. So, how are they feeling? Well, we've got several things that we can look at to see how the American consumer is feeling. The first one we could look at is the Consumer Confidence Index. And the Consumer Confidence Index is up 2 points in July to 97.2. Now, that means it's gone up, which means consumers have gotten more confident from one month to the next. Now, obviously, we don't have August numbers yet, but from June to July, consumers felt a little bit more confident, and it's up 2 points. Now, that's not 2%, that is 0.2 of a percent, up to a number of 97.2. Now, the Consumer Confidence Index also asks a couple of other questions. The first one is how you feel overall, and that's the up 2 points. But the next one is the Present Situation Index. Your present situation, how do you feel about it versus your present situation last month? And that index actually dropped 1.2 points to 131.5. And then finally is the expectations index. So they ask this question: how do you feel about your expectations going forward? How do you feel about the future, your future prospects economically? And that was up a massive 4.5%. So in this particular index, people are feeling optimistic. This is the Consumer Confidence Index. I'm going to share a couple of other indexes here in a minute that track with different groups, but consumer confidence going forward in expectation is up 4.5% to 74.4, which is still low because we really like to see it above 80. Anything under 80 typically lends itself to a recession. And we have been under 80 for 6 months straight. So if all we looked at was this little index, we would be shouting from the rooftops, oh my goodness, recession, recession, recession. Just like when we look at the yield inversion, the yield curve inversion, when that happens, typically it precedes a recession. But it's happened multiple times over the last several years with no recession. So you can't just take one data point and go, oh my gosh, oh my gosh. We have to look at a lot of different things to determine where we are economically. So now when we looked at the reason for the Consumer Confidence Index and the Present Situation Index and the Expectations Index numbers, people said they held back their expectations because of, number one reason, you guessed it, tariffs. It's the big boogeyman right now. It's all over the internet, all over every news article, all over every newscast that we consume. And the pervasive mantra is tariffs are going to raise inflation. Tariffs are going to raise inflation. Now, this was said before tariffs started. It was said when tariffs started. And now they're saying, well, we haven't seen it yet, but it's coming. I promise you it's coming. And that's what we're being told. And that is what we're being fed a steady diet of. And that is actually showing in these numbers because that was cited as the number one worry in the Consumer Confidence Index. Now, I'm not saying tariffs won't or it will. I'm just saying we are being told constantly that it will. And it's having a negative mental effect on people's spending right now. Now, the next one we're going to look at is the Small Business Optimism Index, kind of similar to the Consumer Confidence Index, only it's just small business owners being surveyed, and they are being asked, is are things good? Or are they not good, etc.? And it's just above the 51-year average. So small business owners are just above average in their optimism going forward. Not real great, not real bad, just a little good, just slightly good. And in this one, they asked, what is your top worry? And the top worry of small businesses that were surveyed in this index was taxes. That was the top worry. So I don't know what kind of taxes they were worried about, whether it's business taxes or income taxes or what it might have been, but taxes was listed as the top worry. Now, the next one that I would look at is the Consumer Confidence Survey done by the University of Michigan. They've been doing this forever, and they come up with, again, 3 different indexes, and they call the first one consumer sentiment. The second one is current economic conditions, and the third one is consumer expectations. Okay. These numbers, this almost mirrors the Consumer Confidence Index, but it is different, and they use a different number system. But the consumer sentiment right now in that survey, July of 25, is 61.7. In June, it was 60.7. So we're up a full percentage point. And in July of last year, July 24, it was at 66.4. So we are down substantially from where we were a year ago, but we're up just a little bit from a month ago, heading in the right direction, trending in the right direction. And that's what we're looking for. We're looking for trends. Now, the current economic conditions in the University of Michigan survey is currently at 68%. That is up from June at 64.8. So that's a substantial increase. And that was a substantial increase from a year ago, July 24, when it was only 62.7. So we've gone from 62.7 in July last year to 64.8 last month and 68 even this month. So substantial increase in what consumers said is their current economic condition. That's interesting to me. And then the last one is expectations. Now, expectations has fallen flat in this survey, where it was way high in the other one. Currently at 57.7, down from 58.1, and a year ago it was 68.8. So substantial decrease over time in future consumer expectations in that survey. The next one I look at is the Purchasing Manager Index. This one came out August 7, and the Global Purchasing Manager Index increased at the fastest rate this whole year. The U.S. Purchasing Manager Index is the strongest monthly expansion and fastest growth recorded since December 24. Now, why I look at this one, this is kind of like the Small Business Optimism Index, only the only people in this one are purchasing managers. These are people who have already been told by the CEO, COO, etc., that, hey, we need you to be purchasing this much of X. We need you to be sourcing this. We need you to be sourcing this. So their optimism globally has increased the fastest rate of this entire year this month. And in the U.S., the fastest since December of 2024. I guess that's really all this year as well. So both of those are very strong. Now, that's a leading indicator. When you look at consumer confidence, consumer expectations, and those types of things, that's how do they feel now? That's part of how do they feel now. But the purchasing manager index, I'm looking at how they feel now, but that's a leading indicator for how the consumer may feel later. Because if the purchasing managers are purchasing a bunch of stuff, that means they're getting ready to do a bunch of business. And if they're getting ready to do a bunch of business, that means more hiring. And that's the way I look at it anyway. So, with that, I'm going to look at employment because I'm going to dive now into how are they doing? How is the American consumer doing right now? Current unemployment is 4.2%. I said this on the last podcast. Full employment in this country is defined as typically being an unemployment rate of 5 to 6%. And the first 2 to 3% of unemployment is hardcore unemployment. These are people that are unemployed, but they don't want a job. You couldn't give them a job. Okay, that's what's called hardcore unemployment. Then the next is the real unemployed. Those are the people that are unemployed and they want another job. They're trying to get another job. So being at 4.2 when hardcore is 2 to 3, we're close to like no unemployment. And that's a good thing. That's a very good thing to be at full employment because that gives the Federal Reserve some wiggle room to work on inflation if it does rear its ugly head. Historically, unemployment rate in this country has been 5.67 going forward, and the current number of unemployed is 7.2 million, and that is just not a lot of people out of our entire population. Unfilled jobs, that is the jobs that are advertised right now by employers that are not filled currently, is 7.4 million unfilled jobs, which is almost exactly the amount of the number of unemployed people, which is a very good equilibrium for the labor market. Now, we're going to talk about the last jobs report that just came out, and you're going to hear from everybody that, oh my gosh, there are cracks in the foundation. Employment is a problem right now. And, well, maybe not. Because here we're seeing a pretty good, strong equilibrium for jobs. Market volatility got you stressed. One day you're up, the next day you're down. It's enough to make anyone lose sleep. That's why smart investors are looking beyond traditional stocks and bonds to diversify their portfolio. What makes ILS Capital different? While stocks and bonds swing with market emotions, our investment funds are backed by real estate notes, actual loans secured by real property. This means your investment isn't tied to Wall Street sentiment or corporate earnings reports. Instead, it's connected to tangible assets that people need, homes and commercial buildings. Real estate notes have historically provided more predictable returns because they're based on actual property values and loan payments, not market speculation. It's a completely different approach to building wealth. Ready to add some stability to your investment strategy? Visit ILS Capital at ilscapitalfunds.com/diversify. That's ilscapitalfunds.com/diversify. And learn how our real estate notes backed funds can help balance your portfolio. Investment involves risks, including potential loss of principal. Past performance does not guarantee future results. Please carefully consider investment objectives, risks, charges, and expenses before investing. The labor participation rate, that is, it clicked up a little bit. This is a number that I watch just to see how many people are sitting on the sidelines and not working. There could be a lot of reasons somebody is not working. The labor force participation rate is basically the entire labor force divided by the working age population. And our government defines working age population as 15 to 64-year-olds. Everybody, 15 to 64-year-olds is working age population. Man or woman, disabled or not, it doesn't matter if you're in that age group. So obviously you're not going to have 100%. There are going to be people that choose to stay at home and raise their children. And that's fantastic. You're going to have people who are disabled and can't work. You're going to have people who have reached the ability to retire early, retire before 64, and they don't want to participate in the workforce anymore. All perfectly legitimate reasons to not be in the labor pool. But this number does show us how many people are sitting on the sidelines for those reasons and other reasons, like maybe they have the opportunity to get government paychecks of some sort without working. That could be a reason for sitting on the sidelines. And as you see this, as you see the economy tighten and loosen and tighten and loosen, you'll see this labor force participation rate go up and down. So it is currently sitting at 62.2%, and it peaked in January of 2020 at 67.3. That is the highest it has been in certainly in modern time. Then it fell until about 2015, just slightly falling. Then it slowly climbed back up until COVID hit. And in March 2020, it was 62.6. So it had climbed up. And then April, it was down to 60.1. Now we've climbed from that 60.1 low in COVID back up to 62.2. And I think you're going to see this labor force participation rate continue to go up because of a couple of things. First, you're seeing a crackdown on illegal immigration, and that is having an effect at the lower end of our economy. I say lower end, I mean lower wage. A lot of the jobs that were being fulfilled by illegal immigrants are now going to start being backfilled by U.S. citizens. And we're already starting to see it in job numbers. We had actually an increase at the low end of the wage pool in the last survey. So there was an increase in the number of jobs in the low end. And I think it wasn't an increase in jobs. It was an increase in the jobs that are now on record. It was an increase in the jobs that are now on the books, because a lot of those jobs, I feel, were being filled off the books prior to that. And I think that's a trend that we're going to see continue as the Homeland Security Office continues to do their work in deporting people that are not here legally. Now, you can agree with that, disagree with that policy, but in the end, I'm just talking about the economics of it. And the economics are, we're seeing the labor force participation rate go up, and we're seeing more jobs at the lower wage levels month after month. And I think those are both absolutely and inextricably linked to the deportation situation we have. Now, interesting thing about jobs and wages, July year-to-date wages increased by 3.9%. Wages went up 3.9%. Now, that's something that we want to watch, because that is down significantly from the COVID years of 2021 and 2, I'll call it. Mainly 2022, back when, I mentioned this in the last podcast, we had the Great Recession, the Great Resignation, and wage growth was just off the charts, 8, 9, 10% annualized at that time. Now we're back to a sustainable level of 3.9%. And I say sustainable because this is not pushing inflation. Remember, there's wage push on inflation because it's a cost push. And if wages go up astronomically, that's going to push the prices of goods and services up. And at 3.9, that's very sustainable. That's very good. When you look at the CPI numbers that just came out, sitting at 2.6. So wages are growing faster than goods and services are going up inflation-wise. That's great. That's what we want to see. We don't want to see a situation where prices are going up by 9% and wages are only going up 4. That's a problem that puts a massive bind on everybody in the country. So right now, wage increase 3.9, CPI at 2.6. That is definitely, those are both sustainable. I will admit, though, that 2.6 CPI is much higher than the Fed would like it to be. Now, the Fed came out, as I mentioned in the last podcast, and did not lower rates, did not raise rates. And we had two people on the Fed Open Market Committee that dissented. And dissents are kind of rare, particularly this one where they had two. Governors Michelle Bowman and Christopher Waller made a statement saying that they supported an interest rate cut in the last meeting. Here, it just happened July 30th. They came out and made their decision. And I won't go through this whole article I'm reading here, but basically they said we felt that interest rates should have been cut by 25 basis points. And they went on to say with economic growth slowing this year and signs of a less dynamic labor market, I saw it as appropriate to begin to gradually move and moderate our restrictive policy stance toward a neutral setting. Now, that was Michelle Bowman's explanation. She went on to say that she'd gained greater confidence that tariffs will not present a persistent shock to inflation. And then Waller explained in his dissent that central banks should look through tariffs as a one-off increase in the price level that do not cause inflation beyond a temporary increase. Now, it's interesting. They're both saying the same thing. He cited economic data, including soft growth in the first half of 25, with a real GDP at 1.2%, suggesting that monetary policy should be closer to neutral. Same thing she said. He said, my final reason, and this was key, my final reason to favor a rate cut is that while labor market looks fine on the surface, once we account for expected data revisions, private sector payroll growth has near stall speed. This is fascinating. So what he said here on July 30 is, once we account for expected data revisions, private sector payroll growth is near stall speed. And other data suggest that the downward risks to the labor market have increased. Now, that's fascinating because this was July 30th, and on August 1st, we got the new jobs numbers. New jobs numbers come out, and what does it say? It says that the U.S. economy only added 73,000 new jobs. Now, that's not a lot of jobs for the U.S. economy. To give you a perspective of where we should be, we were told that May had about 150,000 new jobs. And that was touted as, hey, that was a pretty good month, 150,000 or so. That's not bad, just under 150. And we were told that June, we had about the same, about 150,000 new jobs. And again, that month, everybody was touting, hey, everything's good. But then in this jobs report that came out August 1st, that said, July, we only got 73,000. That's half of what we had been told we had gotten the last 2 months. But there's less. In this case, they also revised May down 125,000 to just 19,000 jobs, and June down 133 to just 14,000 new jobs. So now we have 3 months back to back, assuming, and this is a poor assumption, that July's numbers are not revised because they have been so frequently recently. We'll have had, if that number stands, a month with 14,000, a month with 19,000, a month with 73,000 back to back. That is the worst job creation I could find going back to COVID. So that's the jobs situation. The next jobs report will be out September 5th. The person that handles these statistics will not be handling that particular report. She has been removed from her duties because of these massive revisions, whether rightfully or wrongfully. We won't get into the politics of it, but she has been let to go elsewhere, and there will be somebody else handling this reporting. Hopefully, they can figure out a way to get us better numbers. And when I say better, I don't mean a better jobs report. I don't want anybody manipulating the numbers, but better numbers meaning more accurate numbers, numbers that we as investors and business owners can use across the board from small to large and have some confidence that the numbers are accurate. Because if you're making decisions based off of jobs numbers of roughly 150,000 the last couple of months, and then a month later, oh, surprise, there really were virtually no jobs created the last couple of months, which paints an entirely different picture of the economy. So I am hopeful that they can find better ways of getting us this data. And there was a really good article in the Wall Street Journal. The CEO of Bank of America was saying, look, we don't even use this data. We have our own data. We're large enough. We have enough clients. We have enough data points. We don't even use this kind of data. This is so archaic. It's so antiquated. It's so out of date. And really, it's a survey. You know, much like these other surveys we talked about earlier, the consumer confidence and small business optimism index. It's where people just reach out and ask questions. Well, the problem with this particular jobs report is we have fallen to around a 50% response rate. Used to be in the 60s, and the data was fairly accurate at that point, but now we're down into the 50s. People are just not responding to it. And so hopefully we can find something, maybe using some more modern technology than a rotary dial phone to call up people and ask some questions to get some good data there. But that's where we are with the jobs report. Now, that's part of our second question, which is how are they doing? The other part of how are they doing is digging in to say, okay, we got full employment. There's a lot of jobs, although job growth has certainly slowed to almost a stop. Still, not a lot of unemployed. Consumer confidence is steady. Purchasing manager index is strong, really strong. But how are the consumers doing in their home? And for that, I would dig into loan delinquencies. So let's take a look at loan delinquencies. All commercial bank loan delinquencies currently are sitting at 2.7%. Now, that's the same as Q4 2005 for reference. And the high in modern history was during the Great Recession in Q2 of 2009 when it hit 4.85, or about twice what it is currently. The low, and I did not factor COVID era when you couldn't even get numbers that were accurate, but the low non-COVID era, I would call it, was Q2 in 2015 at 1.98. Let's call it 2%. So 2% was the low. Almost 5% was the high in the Great Recession. We're the same as 2005 Q4 right now, which is pretty much in the middle at 2.7. So consumer loan delinquencies are not high. in my opinion. They are right in line with historical norms. We don't see it as high. We don't see it as low. It's just right in the line with pretty much everything else. Let's look at car payments. Americans are behind on their car payments. But when you dig in, what you see is subprime car payments. Delinquency is currently sitting at 6.6%, and that is high. That is the highest on record back to 1994. That's a long time. That even takes into account the Great Recession, where subprime was sitting at about 5%. So, yes, subprime car loans, we got high delinquency right now, highest on record. Now, prime is actually substantially lower at 0.4%, not even a 0.5%. During the Great Recession, it was sitting at about less than 1%. So we're at 0.4. We're way lower than that. So I would say, just given that data, we're seeing a huge disparity between people that are getting subprime loans and people that are getting prime loans in the car in the car payment category. Let's take a look at total credit card debt. Total credit card debt in the United States, $1.21 trillion as of the second quarter. It is a new high, a new record high, surpassing the previous record set in the fourth quarter of 2024. Credit card balances are going up, also setting a new high. Delinquency is elevated, but not at a high. 6.93% of balances turned into delinquency last year. The average credit card balance per card in this country is $6,580. The average household credit card balance is about $9,100. So, yes, we have a lot of credit card debt, but adjusted for inflation, it's probably not as high as what this makes it look. When we take out the 9% inflation we had a couple of years ago, I don't really see this as a huge alarming situation when the average household has $9,100 in credit card debt. Obviously, more than we'd like to see, but I don't think it's and 6% delinquency on credit cards, again, is not a high for delinquencies. So it's not a warning bell to me. But when you look at enough news and enough articles, you will find people that want to ring that warning bell. So let's take a look at one. A leading economist is warning that the U.S. economy is on the brink of recession. After economic data last week signaled the labor market conditions are softening and inflation is rising, which could complicate the ability of the Fed to support the economy. Mark Zandi is the chief economist for Moody's Analytics, and he wrote in a post on X that the economy is on the precipice of recession. That's some doom and gloom talk there. But he cited the weaker than expected jobs report that we just went through, the high revisions of the previous two, and so forth. And the inflation that we just talked about at 2.6%, it did rise to there over the last month. And he says it's going to be tough for the Fed to come to the rescue. And it goes on and on to acknowledge that the unemployment rate is in a good place and so forth. But he is betting that that we're on the precipice of a wow, that's really strong words. A precipice of recession. He says the economy-wide hiring freeze, particularly for recent graduates, and the decline of hours worked is telling the conditions of the labor market. Well, I can tell you from all of the business owners that I talk to, we are all, and including my company, we are all endeavoring into some form of restructuring this year. Most of the people that I'm talking to are doing the same thing I am, and that is restructuring from the top down our company and looking at every single person in our headcount saying, is there a more efficient way to do it? We are implementing our own little mini Doge. And as such, we have cut our headcount this calendar year by 32%. We have cut our payroll by 26.4%. And that's just in my tiny little company of 50 some employees. But we are really using 2025 to tighten up, get efficient, and restructure everything we can, because we believe 2026 is going to be just a absolute record year for us, and we want to be lean and mean and efficient and ready to take advantage of that. And that's just for me, that's just in my companies. And but I promise you, the people that I go to lunch with and have dinner with and talk to on the phone and through all the different communication methods, I promise you, I'm hearing that over and over and over again. And I can't speak to the big businesses as I don't have contacts in big business, but I can tell you in the small business in America, that is what we're doing. We are absolutely lowering our head count, but it's not because we don't think things are going to be good going forward. It's quite the opposite. We're lowering our head count because we're cutting the fat, we're restructuring, we're reorganizing, and then we're bringing in key people in key positions to get ready for a massive explosion of growth next year. That's my outlook on it. Everybody will have their own, obviously. But I wanted to bring you a doom and gloom outlook as we find it here as well. Now, on the flip side of that, you get another Wall Street Journal article that says it's scorching hot summer for deals on Wall Street. Vacation can wait. Now this is great. This came out a week ago or so. I don't see the date on it. Here we go. August 3rd came out in the Wall Street Journal. It says late summer is typically one of the slowest times for deal makers on Wall Street. Not this one. A sudden rebound in corporate tie-ups has bankers and lawyers scrambling. Vacation homes are sitting empty and families are being left in a lurch as the deal makers are more energized than they've been in years. Now, this was found. I'm not going to read you this whole article, but basically it's saying there is, after a lull of a lot of deals not getting made, and they're talking about mergers and acquisitions mostly, just not a lot of stuff being done. Now, late summer, which is typically a dead time of year for Wall Street, they are they are really busy right now. And it goes through to list a lot of these M&A deals. Union Pacific's $71.5 billion acquisition of Norfolk Southern, and a whole lot of others that are talked about throughout the article. But the point here is that deals are starting to happen. And when you look at mergers and acquisitions, what are they doing? They're restructuring. They're restructuring through acquisition, most generally, and they're going to cut headcount. They're going to cut the fat. They're going to cut the redundancy between the two companies that are getting together. And they're going to say, instead of 2 HR departments, we only need 1 now. Instead of 2 accounting departments, they're going to put everything together, and that's going to cut employment. So you're going to see that. But that's not necessarily all a bad thing if it leads to massive growth going forward. So it's just a different way of looking at it, but it's not all doom and gloom. Now, the last thing I want to cover before I put a bow on this or wrap it up or however you want to call it is I talked earlier in the tariff talk a couple of episodes ago, maybe 3 episodes ago, about all the recent announcements of new manufacturing jobs. and advanced technology jobs that had been announced that, these companies, lots of companies have said, hey, and most generally they're standing alongside the president. Hey, we just made a deal. We're going to spend $165 billion for an AI chip plant in such and such a location in Arizona. That's TSMC's expansion. And the next one is, JX Advanced Metals in Mesa, Arizona. They're going to put in a new facility. All of these announcements are great, but I don't really care about announcements. I care about how many of them broke ground, because it's easy for a CEO to stand there and say, oh, yeah, we commit to spending X number of dollars, and we're going to do that by building an advanced plant in Alabama, and then never do it. So it gets great press. Everybody gets a warm fuzzy and, feels good about it. But in the end, if it's not actually done, if it's not actually built, who the hell cares, right? So I just did a simple little AI search here, and my search said examples of the newly announced manufacturing projects that have been started. And if you want to do this search, it will pull you up a list, and it is massive, of all these that have either broke ground, bought ground. Some must have been announced much prior to the tariff talks, because some are already nearing completion, some are at completion, but we're talking about a lot of these. A lot of these announcements are actually going through. And if you remember in my tariff episode, I stipulated, you know, this only matters if these actually get off the ground, if they actually happen, if these jobs actually are created. And what we're seeing is they are. All across America, Toyota's plant in North Carolina is ready to begin production and is expected to start shipping batteries for electrified vehicles in North America in April 2025. That one's already done practically, or should be. Modine's new plant in Wisconsin, operating a new plant in Franklin, Wisconsin, focused on thermal management systems, should be complete by 2029. Next one. I'm not going to go through all of these, but suffice it to say, there are a lot of them that have already started construction, already bought the ground, already broke ground, or are already finished or in some form therein. So it appears to me that this is not just rhetoric. This is actually happening. Here's one in Prairie View, Texas. OYH Construction Materials Plant in Prairie View, Texas. That's just northwest of Houston. This global company has broken ground on a manufacturing plant focused on weatherproof roofing. I mean, just all across America, this massive list comes up, and this one says has broken ground. That's what we're looking for. Has broken ground, or has purchased the ground, or has already started construction. And look, we're only 7 months into this administration, and we are seeing massive amounts of manufacturing. They break it down by category. Semiconductor and advanced technologies is a big category. Automotive and EV battery manufacturing, aerospace. There's 4 or 5 under aerospace that are delivering new plants and new facilities. Pharmaceuticals and biotechnology, and then other, which has everything from weatherproof roofing to coffee manufacturing in it. So take a look at that. That is what we are seeing on the horizon. That's my on the horizon outlook. And when you take all of this together, we have a mixed bag of data. Picture this. You found the perfect investment property. The numbers work, the location is ideal, but your traditional bank wants 60 days to close and treats your rental property like it's some risky gamble they've never seen before. Sound familiar? Here's the thing. Most banks just don't understand real estate investing. They're built for home buyers, not investors. And that's where Investor Loan Source comes in. We're a financing company created specifically by and for real estate investors. We know what rental income looks like. We understand fix and flip timelines, and we get that commercial deals move fast. Whether you're doing buy and hold rentals, fix and flip projects, or commercial acquisitions, we speak your language and we can close in days, not months. Stop explaining your business to bankers who just don't get it. Visit ils.cash/fast. That's ils.cash/fast and work with lenders who understand real estate investing. Like we do most months. You could, if you wanted to, have a bearish outlook on it and say, like the Moody's Analytics gentleman did, recession is right around the corner. Inflation is almost guaranteed because of these tariffs. And we may even have stagflation. There have been a couple of economists that have even used the 1970s word stagflation. Or you could look at this data, and I think we could very easily argue a case for a bullish outlook for the economy and say, man, with all this manufacturing that's coming in, employment is still strong. Companies are getting leaner, they're getting meaner, they're getting ready for expansion and growth. Inflation is a little high, yes, a little higher than the Fed would like it, but not nearly as high as wage growth, which is a really good metric. Just looking at inflation in and of itself is not as important as looking at it against wage growth, in my opinion. And we could look at all of this and have a very bullish outlook as well. So I'm not going to tell you how you should look at it and how you should invest, but I am on the bullish side of that equation. And I think we are going to have a phenomenal 2026, and we will continue to strengthen our operations to make sure we can take full advantage of that. I hope this was helpful. And, if nothing else, I hope you jotted down a few of these things that we look at. And we do this pretty much on a quarterly basis. And, you can dig in and start doing your own quarterly outlook and saying, you know what, based on these things, I think this is going to happen. The other thing is, if you're just doing a deal here or there, sit down and pull these data points up before you make that commitment, before you do that transaction, whatever it may be that you're thinking of buying or investing in. And it may sway you one way or the other in your endeavor. But at any rate, these are the things that I like to look at on a quarterly basis. Hopefully that's helpful for you. And that's this episode of The Invested Mindset. We'll see you on the next episode. Thanks for joining us on The Invested Mindset. To continue receiving actionable wealth building strategies, subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Make sure you turn on the auto download to ensure you never miss an episode. And if today's insights moved you closer to financial freedom, please take a moment to leave us a rating. It helps fellow entrepreneurs and investors discover these valuable strategies. I'm Tom Berry, and I'll see you next time as we continue to build the path to lasting wealth and freedom.